The video call connected, and my mother's smiling face appeared on the screen from 1,000 miles away. "We sold the house, darling," she chirped, raising a glass of wine. My brother, Julian, leaned into the frame, his voice thick with smug satisfaction. "That rusty old telescope of yours wasn't making any money, was it? You just keep stargazing, big sis. Leave the real work to me." My world went silent, but they didn't know. While they celebrated, I was already opening a secure browser. They thought they were closing a deal. I knew I was opening a new theater of war. My name is Major Irene Walsh, though most people just call me Renee. I'm 33 years old, and my world is one of precision, order, and cold, hard data. 12 hours. That's how long I'd been riveted to my console inside the secure Operations Center at Schriever Space Force Base, Colorado. The air, recycled and humming with the low thrum of server farms, felt electric. We were performing a delicate orbital calibration on a $2 billion communications satellite. A whisper-thin adjustment across thousands of miles of empty space. My team and I tracked its signal, our focus absolute. Finally, the telemetry confirmed success. A wave of quiet, professional relief washed over the room. I leaned back in my chair, the tension in my shoulders easing for the first time since sunrise, and slowly lifted the heavy David Clark headset from my ears. The silence that followed was a reward in itself. That's when my personal monitor blinked, an incoming video call routed through a civilian network. The caller ID read, "Savannah Home." A genuine, unforced smile touched my lips. I pictured my mother, Beatrice, maybe calling from the kitchen to ask if I'd gotten the care package she'd sent. I clicked accept. The image that filled my screen wasn't the quiet kitchen I'd imagined. It was a party, a celebration. My mother was there, not in her usual apron, but in a vibrant Lily Pulitzer cocktail dress. A glass of Chardonnay held aloft in her perfectly manicured hand. Beside her, my father, Arthur, stood in a stiff Brooks Brothers polo shirt, his face a mask of strained civility, a glass of Maker's Mark bourbon sweating in his grip. And there, preening between them, was my younger brother Julian, his face flushed with cheap wine and self-importance. "Renee, darling," my mother's voice sliced through the quiet of the ops center, sharp and unnaturally cheerful. "Surprise, we have the most fantastic news. The Orion house is sold." I froze. My mind, still processing orbital mechanics, struggled to lock onto her words. The Orion house, my great-grandfather's house, my house. A very wealthy developer made an offer we just couldn't refuse, she continued, her smile never faltering. "Julian needs a significant investment for his new Web3 project. This is the future, darling. The real future." She said the word future with a dismissive wave, as if my career, my entire life spent in service to the nation's technological vanguard, was a quaint relic from the Stone Age. Before I could form a single word, Julian leaned into the frame, his smirk widening. "That's right, big sis," he slurred, his voice dripping with a lifetime of casual condescension. "That old house was just falling apart. That rusty old telescope on the roof wasn't exactly making money, was it? You just keep doing your stargazing up there in the mountains. Leave the real money-making to me down here." His laughter, joined by my mother's high-pitched tittering, crackled through the speaker. It wasn't the sound of joy. It was the sound of static interference on a secure channel, the unmistakable, gut-wrenching sound of a catastrophic system failure. My gaze drifted to my father. He remained silent, a statue of acquiescence. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend the house. He simply raised his bourbon glass in a mute, cowardly toast, a silent co-conspirator in the dismantling of my heritage. To them, the observatory where my great-grandfather had first charted the southern constellations, the place where my own dreams had taken flight, was nothing more than a pile of scrap metal, a worthless asset liquidated to fund another of Julian's fleeting fantasies. The pain wasn't just about the house, it was the crushing realization that in the family ledger, my life's work was valued at 0. A voice to my left pulled me back from the void. "Major Walsh, are you okay, ma'am?" It was my lieutenant, a young, sharp officer, who looked at me with a genuine concern. I drew a long, slow breath. The dry Colorado air scraped against my throat. I straightened my back, my posture returning to its military bearing. My face, I am sure, was a blank slate. "I'm fine, Lieutenant," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the chaos raging within. The anger was there, a white-hot nova, but in my world, raw emotion is a liability. It's noise that corrupts the signal. So I did what I was trained to do. I compressed it, contained it, channeled it. The inferno of betrayal was instantly converted into a cold, efficient stream of data. I terminated the call without another word. My hand, steady and sure, moved from the call screen to my keyboard. I swiveled in my chair, turning my back on the elegant, swirling diagrams of satellite orbits that had occupied my entire day. I opened a new, secure browser, its stark white screen a canvas for my next mission. My fingers moved with purpose, the clicking of the keys the only sound in my small corner of the universe. Into the search bar, I typed a simple, precise string of words: Public Property Records, Chatham County, Georgia. The process of data acquisition had begun. They had forgotten a fundamental principle I lived by, one we often repeated in my line of work. In God we trust, all others we monitor. This time, the entity I had failed to monitor was my own family. That was a system error I was about to correct. The cursor blinked on the screen, a solitary point of light against the sterile white background of the public records search page. It was a cold, impersonal gateway to a cold, impersonal truth. Staring at it, I felt a strange disconnect. The words Chatham County, Georgia seemed alien, a data point from another world. But that data point was the epicenter of my past. And as I stared, the digital wall dissolved, replaced by the humid air and moss-draped oaks of a savanna summer. The present faded, and the archives of memory opened. The first time I truly understood, I was a system error in my own family. I was 12. That year, I'd poured my soul into the school science fair. My project was an intricate, hand-painted model of the solar system, with each planet and its major moons painstakingly crafted and placed in orbit. I'd won first prize, a simple blue ribbon and a certificate. I remember holding it in my hands, the paper still warm from the principal's grasp, feeling a pride so pure it felt like I could float. That same week, Julian, playing baseball in the street with his friends, sent a line drive straight through the Price's stained glass window next door. My parents were mortified. They paid a handsome sum for the repair and, to cheer Julian up, bought him a brand-new, top-of-the-line Easton baseball bat. It was displayed proudly on the mantelpiece in the living room. When I finally got the chance to show them my blue ribbon, my mother glanced at it, her attention already drifting. "That's nice, Renee," she'd said, a hint of impatience in her voice. But a young lady should really be spending her time on more graceful pursuits. The cotillion classes are starting soon, you know. My blue ribbon, the physical proof of my passion and intellect, was quietly placed in a box of old report cards and tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic. Julian's bat, the reward for his carelessness, remained on the mantel. The pattern, once established, became a law of our family's physics. Years later, the acceptance letter arrived. It was thick, heavy, and bore the official seal of the United States Air Force Academy. A full scholarship, a golden ticket to my dreams. It was one of the proudest days of my life. But when I called home, my news was met with distracted congratulations. The family was in the middle of another Julian-centric crisis. He'd just been fired from his third job in 2 years, and they were busy liquidating some assets to fund his latest venture, a boutique coffee shop. My father's voice over the phone was weary. "That's wonderful news, Renee," he'd said, but there was no real warmth. "It's a good thing you have the government to take care of you. We're a little tight right now, pooling everything we have to get Julian's Cafe off the ground. He has a real head for business, you know. He's just never had the right opportunity." That coffee shop, Julian's Java joint, went bankrupt in 6 months. But it didn't matter. In their eyes, my career, the grueling all-nighters, studying astrophysics and cryptography, the physical and mental discipline required to become an officer, wasn't a hard-won achievement. It was a convenience, a problem that solved itself, freeing them up to focus on propping up my brother's expensive failures. My sacrifice was simply filed away as a cost-saving measure. I closed my eyes, shutting out the sterile glow of the monitor in Colorado. The dry, recycled air of the command center was replaced by the smell of old wood, machine oil, and the faint, sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine from the garden below. I was back in the observatory, with him, my grandfather. He was a retired Gulfstream aerospace engineer, a man who spoke the language of thrust and vectors, but whose eyes held the wonder of a poet when he looked at the night sky. He was the one who taught me how to handle the old brass and steel Celestron telescope, how to find my way through the star charts that papered the walls. I remembered one trip we took, just the two of us, to the Kennedy Space Center. Standing in the shadow of the colossal Saturn V rocket, he'd bought me a small model of it. "You belong up there, Renee," he'd whispered, his voice full of a conviction my parents never had. "Don't let anyone ever tell you your sky is too small." He loved quoting Carl Sagan. "Somewhere," he'd often say, looking through the eyepiece, "something incredible is waiting to be known." He wasn't just talking about stars, he was talking about me. He was the one who first showed me the constellation that hung like a celestial warrior over our Savannah home. "That's Orion," he'd pointed. "The hunter. See his belt, his sword? He never loses sight of his target, Renee. He is patient, he is relentless. Be like him." That house, that observatory, it was never about the real estate. It wasn't an asset on a balance sheet. It was my launch pad. It was the sacred ground where my grandfather had given me the universe, and my family had just sold it for a handful of digital beans, a hollow promise of blockchain wealth. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How a place can become more than just wood and nails. How it can hold the only proof you have that someone, somewhere, truly saw you. Maybe you have a place like that in your memory, too. A place that holds the echo of a voice that believed in you when no one else did. I opened my eyes. The screen was still there, the cursor still blinking. But something inside me had shifted. The grief had crystallized into something hard, sharp, and clear. The sorrow had burned away, leaving behind the cold, bright certainty of a targeting system locking on to its objective. My grandfather was right. Narayan is a hunter. The hunter had a new target, and this time she wouldn't miss. Emotion is noise. Data is signal. This principle is the bedrock of my profession, the mantra that separates catastrophic failure from mission success. As the echoes of my family's betrayal faded, the noise subsided. All that remained was the signal, and it was screaming. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my movements economical and precise. Within minutes, the Chatham County Public Records database delivered its payload. The data materialized on my screen in stark black and white columns. There it was, the deed transfer. The Orion House had been sold to a company named Coastal Empire Holdings, LLC, a shell corporation, most likely. I scanned the numbers. The sale price was a joke, at least 40% below the current market appraisal. A red flag. Then I found the authorization. The transaction was executed using a limited power of attorney I'd signed 4 years ago. I remembered it clearly. It was for the sole purpose of authorizing necessary repairs to the roof while I was on a deployment. It was never meant to authorize a sale. They had not only broken my trust, but they had also been sloppy. In their greed and haste, they'd left a digital trail a mile wide. I initiated a secure download of every document: the deed, the transfer tax forms, the fraudulent power of attorney. I compiled them into a single, heavily encrypted file. My training took over. This was no longer a family dispute. It was an intelligence-gathering operation. Phase 1, data analysis, complete. Phase 2, establish a secure communications channel and acquire legal assets. I needed a lawyer in Savannah, a ground-based operative. A simple Google search was out of the question. It was too random, too insecure. Instead, I logged into the United States Air Force Academy's alumni network, a secure private database of some of the most capable professionals in the country. I ran a targeted search: attorneys in Georgia specializing in real estate and military law. A handful of names appeared. One stood out: Marcus Thorne, a graduate from the class of '88, former colonel, Marine Corps judge, advocate general's corps. The bio listed his specialty as complex litigation and noted his reputation as a bulldog in the courtroom, a Marine JAG officer. Perfect. He would understand the mission. I drafted an email, stripping it of all emotion. It was a situation report, nothing more. Subject: urgent legal consultation request. Major Walsh, USSF, potential SCRA violation and fraudulent transaction. The body of the email was just as concise. I identified myself, my active duty status, and briefly outlined the situation, referencing the abuse of the power of attorney and the potential violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act, the SCRA, a federal law that provides legal protections for military personnel. I attached the encrypted file containing the documents and sent it. The reply came in less than an hour. It was as direct as my own. Subject: urgent legal consultation, Major. This is a flagrant assault. Your file is received and reviewed. Establish a secure, end-to-end encrypted video call at your earliest convenience. We have work to do. M. Thorne. The sense of validation was immediate and powerful. I wasn't just an emotional daughter. I was Major Walsh, a service member whose rights had been violated. And someone was ready to fight. The video call with Marcus Thorne felt less like a client consultation and more like a pre-mission briefing. He appeared on my screen, a man in his late 50s with sharp eyes and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. He wasn't in a stuffy law office, but a study lined with books and what looked like a framed Marine Corps standard. "Major," he began, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded respect. They thought because you were halfway across the country, serving on a mountain in Colorado, you were effectively on Mars. They thought you couldn't touch them. They made a grave miscalculation. A ghost of a smile played on his lips, a dry, humorless expression I recognized from senior officers. Here's our plan of attack. I'm immediately filing a cease and desist, along with a formal notice to rescind the sale based on fraudulent authorization and a clear violation of the SCRA. That will paralyze them. He leaned closer to his camera. But that's just the opening salvo. While they're scrambling, I'm bringing in a private investigator to dig into this Coastal Empire Holdings. I want to know who is behind it, who funded it, and what their real objective is. The man I have in mind is one of the best. A former NSA signals analyst. He finds things people don't want found. I agree, I said, my voice as steady as his. The feeling of helplessness that had threatened to engulf me was gone, replaced by the clear, cold focus of a shared strategy. I finally had an ally, a fire team. Good, Marcus nodded. Let them think they're dealing with a distraught daughter. We know what this is, a targeted operation, and we are going to dismantle it piece by piece. As soon as our call ended, I turned to a separate monitor. Marcus had his operative. I had my own skills. I began my own deep dive, initiating a full-spectrum open-source intelligence, or OSINT, analysis on Coastal Empire Holdings. Cross-referencing business licenses, social media footprints, network domains, anything and everything publicly available. The grief and shock of the past hours had been fully processed, archived. The mission was now live. Operation Orion was officially a go. Target acquired. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in controlled patience. I continued my duties at Schriever, my mind a split-screen processor. On one half, I tracked satellite telemetry and oversaw my team. On the other, I ran silent, deep web searches on Coastal Empire Holdings, building a preliminary intel packet. But mostly I waited for Marcus Thorne to make his move. The confirmation came via a secure message. The package is delivered. Simple, efficient. I pictured the legal notice arriving at my parents' house, at the registered address of the LLC, and at the office of their lawyer. The opening move in our chess match had been made. Now we waited for the counter-move. That evening, Marcus initiated another encrypted video call. His face appeared as resolute as before, but I detected a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Renee," he said. The use of my first name was deliberate, a subtle shift from the formal major to something more akin to a comrade in arms. It was a gesture of respect, not familiarity, and it landed with surprising warmth. The legal notices have been received. They have 10 business days to formally respond. He paused, letting the weight of the actions settle. I also took the liberty of speaking with your parents' attorney, a local guy, more suited to drafting wills than actual litigation. A dry chuckle rumbled in his chest. He started stammering the moment I brought up the Service Members Civil Relief Act. It was clear he'd never even heard of it. They're amateurs, Renee. They walked into a minefield without a map. His confidence was a shield. For the first time since that dreadful call, I felt the icy grip of isolation begin to thaw. I was no longer a solitary satellite adrift in a cold, hostile void. I had a ground station. I had a partner. "Good," I replied, my voice reflecting his calm. "So we monitor their channels and wait for their signal." The signal came sooner than I expected, but not from the channel I was monitoring. It wasn't a calculated legal response. It was a raw emotional burst of static, fired directly at me. An email from my father, Arthur. The subject line was simply my name, Irene. I opened it, my stomach tightening. The words on the screen were a torrent of panicked accusations and wounded pride. What in God's name do you think you're doing? Are you suing your own family? Over a pile of old bricks and mortar? Julian has already made promises to his investors, Irene. He has commitments. You're not just being selfish, you're actively destroying your brother's future. Do you have any idea who the principal of Coastal Empire Holdings is? It's Sterling Blackwood. Sterling Blackwood. The man could buy and sell this entire city while he eats his breakfast cereal. You need to withdraw this lawsuit, now, before you ruin yourself and embarrass this entire family beyond repair. I read the email twice. The pathetic, blame-shifting cowardice was familiar, but buried within his tirade was a critical piece of intelligence he had provided in his panic. A name, Sterling Blackwood. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the entire email to Marcus. My own subject line was 3 words, primary target identified. My secure line rang less than 5 minutes later. It was Marcus. Sterling Blackwood, he said, his voice low and thoughtful. He wasn't asking, he was processing. I could almost hear the gears turning in his legal mind. Now it makes sense. Blackwood is a recluse, a ghost. He moves capital like a phantom, incredibly powerful, but almost never seen in public. He's ruthless and he's meticulous. This is no longer a simple real estate grab, Renee. A man like Blackwood doesn't get his hands dirty for a 40% discount. He wants that property for a very specific reason, and it's not the house itself. There was a pause. I waited. Then I heard him give a short, sharp laugh. It was the sound of a warrior relishing a worthy opponent. "It's all right," he said, the energy in his voice shifting from analytical to predatory. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Let them think we're just a lone Space Force officer and a washed-up old lawyer. It'll make their surprise all the more profound." He leaned in again, and this time his eyes were locked on mine, burning with intensity. There's a quote from General Mattis I've always admired. "Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everyone you meet." Our politeness is done. Our professionalism is just beginning. Now we execute the plan. A surge of pure adrenaline shot through me, sharp and clean. This had transformed. It was no longer just a fight for a house, for a memory. It had escalated into a strategic engagement, a high-stakes game of intellect and will against a hidden, powerful adversary. My father's panicked email was meant to intimidate me into submission. Instead, it had given us a name. It had given the hunter his scent. I had expected a legal countermove, a motion to dismiss, a settlement offer. What I did not expect was a direct assault on my integrity, delivered with the chilling precision of a targeted cyber weapon. It arrived as a priority notification from Marcus, a single file protected by the highest level of encryption he could apply. The message attached was brief and ominous. "Renee, brace yourself. Blackwood just fired his first real shot." My heart hammered against my ribs as I initiated the decryption sequence. My screen flickered and the file opened. It was a screenshot. A clean, simple image of a chat conversation from a messaging app called Cypher. I knew the app. It was renowned for its end-to-end encryption, a favorite among journalists and privacy advocates. The kind of app where messages are designed to be untraceable, inviolable. The sender's name at the top of the screen was mine. Renee Walsh. The recipient was Julian. The timestamp was from several months ago. I scanned the content, and the air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. Heard the new project hit a wall. Don't worry about it. If you really need the capital, just tell Mom and Dad to find a buyer for the Orion house. Your dream is more important than some place I'm never at, anyway. The final message was followed by a single damning heart emoji. It was a perfect lie. A masterpiece of corrupted data, packaged in the trusted interface of modern technology. Every word was a poisoned dart, crafted to sound exactly like the kind of weary, sacrificial thing they had always expected me to say. I snatched my phone and called Marcus, pacing the confines of my small office at the base. The usual calm of the room felt suffocating. "This is a fabrication, Marcus," I said, and for the first time my voice cracked, losing its carefully maintained composure. "It's fake. I have never used cipher to communicate with my family, ever." Marcus let out a long, weary sigh on the other end of the line. "I know that, Renee, and you know that. But Blackwood has a new attorney, a real shark from Atlanta, and he's spinning a narrative." Marcus's voice was grim. "He's arguing that as a signals intelligence officer, you would naturally use a secure, encrypted app for a sensitive family decision you wanted to keep off the record, and that now you're simply having seller's remorse and lying to the court." The phone felt cold in my hand. "He's making me out to be a two-faced government agent, working in the shadows against my own family." "Worse," Marcus corrected. "He's making you out to be a liar who hides behind her security clearance." A chill, colder than the Colorado winter outside, crept down my spine. This wasn't the clumsy work of my parents or the desperate scheming of my brother. Their brand of cruelty was loud, emotional, and careless. This was different. This was cold, calculated, and professional. This was a psychological operation designed by an expert. They were using the very fabric of my world, secrecy, technology, and data integrity, as a weapon against me. The irony was so profound, it was nauseating. I spend my life ensuring the sanctity of the nation's most sensitive data, only to be brought to my knees by a single fraudulent screenshot. "They've created a digital ghost," I murmured, my analytical brain kicking into gear even as my heart felt like it was being crushed. I stopped pacing and stared at the wall, seeing not drywall, but a complex, unsolvable equation. To definitively prove a message on a platform like Cipher is fake without forensic access to the source device, it's a near impossible inverse problem. "And that," Marcus said, his voice heavy, "is the kill shot." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Blackwood's attorney just filed a motion to compel. He is formally requesting that the court order you to surrender your personal cell phone for a full forensic examination to verify the messages." The trap snapped shut. It was brutally, elegantly perfect. I was a senior officer in the U.S. Space Force. My phone contained classified communications, secure protocols, privileged information that was critical to national security. I could not turn it over. It was a violation of federal law and my sworn duty. But if I refused a direct court order, I would be held in contempt. The case would be lost. I would be officially branded a liar, hiding behind the shield of national security. I was trapped in a perfect catch-22. Comply and I risk prison for dereliction of duty. Refuse and I lose everything, my name and my honor smeared by a lie I cannot disprove. Have you ever been there? That moment when you're caught in a lie that isn't yours, cornered by a situation with no right answer? Every door is locked, and the person who holds the key is the one who built the prison around you. You can scream, you can fight, but you're boxed in by a logic that is designed to make you fail. I sank into my chair, the phone still pressed to my ear. For the first time in this entire battle, I felt a wave of true, paralyzing helplessness. They had found the one scenario, the one elegant, impossible problem, for which I had no solution. I was a warrior without a weapon, an analyst without data. I was completely, utterly stuck. For a full minute, I was paralyzed. The perfect trap, the elegant, impossible problem, held me in its unyielding logic. I felt like a test pilot in a simulator, spinning towards the ground, with every alarm blaring and no controls responding. The sensation of utter, systemic failure was absolute. I was checkmated. Then, through the roaring static of my panic, a new signal emerged, a memory. It was the voice of a grizzled master sergeant, my instructor at a cyber warfare training course years ago. He was standing in front of a whiteboard, scrawling diagrams of network defenses. "Don't attack the firewall head-on," he'd barked at us. "That's what they expect. The enemy spends 99% of their time fortifying the front gate. You find the forgotten service port, you find the unpatched software from a third-party vendor. You find the human error, you don't attack the wall, you find the crack." The helplessness didn't vanish, it transmuted. The panic receded, forged by the heat of my anger into a cold, hard, professional fury. I was a major in the United States Space Force. We don't solve impossible problems, we dismantle them. We find the crack. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus. The desperation was gone from my voice, replaced by the crisp authority of an officer taking command of a compromised situation. "Marcus, I can't surrender the phone, that's a non-starter. But we've been trying to disprove the lie. That's the wrong vector. We need to attack its origin." I took a breath, my mind racing. "We need to find out who took that screenshot, where they were standing, what time of day it was. We need a full forensic analysis of the image file itself, metadata, compression artifacts, pixel-level scrutiny. We need an expert." "You're in luck," Marcus's voice came back, steady and reassuring. "I already have one on retainer, Dexter Vance. The PI I told you about. He's not just a gumshoe detective, Renee. He's a digital sorcerer." Dexter Vance was an enigma. I never saw his face or heard his voice. All communication was conducted through a military-grade encrypted chat client, his messages appearing on my screen like dispatches from the ghost in the machine. I sent him the screenshot file. His only reply was "Acknowledged, initiating digital autopsy, stand by." For hours there was silence. Then a report materialized in our secure channel. "Subject image has been scrubbed of primary EXIF data," Dex began. "Timestamp, GPS coordinates, device model, all wiped." The perpetrator knew enough to cover the basics. My heart sank. But the next message appeared. They were an amateur, a sloppy one. They missed things, the human element. A new image file appeared. It was the screenshot, but with a small section magnified by 1,000%. It was the battery icon in the top right corner of the phone's display. "See that tiny distortion?" Dex's message continued. "That's a glare, a reflection, it's a window. Based on the angle of the light and the known layout of Savannah's streets, I can estimate the time of day the photo was taken, late afternoon, and that's not all." Another magnification, this time focusing on the faint reflection within the reflection. I'm seeing a shape, part of a painting on a wall. My blood ran cold. I knew that shape. A flash of memory, so vivid I could smell the lemon polish on the furniture. It was the corner of a large, gaudy oil painting of a clipper ship that had hung in my father's home office for as long as I could remember. They had done it right there, in my home. The audacity of it was breathtaking, but Dex wasn't finished. His messages kept coming, a rapid-fire sequence of discovery. There's another artifact, lower right corner of the screenshot. See this smudge? It's not a fingerprint. It's the edge of a logo on the phone case the device was in when the picture was taken. Another magnified image popped up. A stylized, barely there logo of a hawk. That's the branding for Avian Armor, a boutique company that makes limited edition phone cases, their Raptor model, to be exact. It was only sold for 1 month, 6 months ago, exclusively through their online store. I held my breath, my knuckles white as I gripped my desk. I knew what was coming next. It's amazing what you can find in breached e-commerce databases. Dex's final message appeared. According to their sales records, there was only one Raptor case shipped to the Savannah, Georgia area. The purchase was made with a Visa credit card ending in the numbers 8842. A card registered to Mr. Julian Walsh. Silence. The blinking cursor on the screen was the only thing moving in the universe. We had him. The digital ghost now had a face, a name, and a credit card number. The lie now had a source, the missile had a lock. We had a heat signature. The evidence against Julian was a small, satisfying victory, a tactical win that felt good for a moment but solved nothing. The central strategic question remained, a persistent anomaly nagging at the edge of my data set. Why? Why would a reclusive, powerful billionaire like Sterling Blackwood go to such extraordinary lengths, employing sophisticated legal traps and fabricating evidence, all for one small, historic house on a hill? The motive simply didn't match the methodology. The sheer force being applied was wildly disproportionate to the stated target. There was a missing variable. The answer arrived 2 days later, not from my own meticulous OSINT work, but from the digital ether where Dex Vance operated. A new report appeared in our secure channel. It wasn't a memo, it was a data bomb, and its detonation blew my entire understanding of the situation to pieces. Target's motive acquired, the message began, stark and declarative. Sterling Blackwood doesn't just want your land, Renee. He wants the sky above it. Dex had done what I couldn't legally do. He had quietly penetrated the city planning department's internal servers to unearth a confidential development proposal filed under a subsidiary of Coastal Empire Holdings. The project was codenamed Titan Point. The architectural renderings showed it wasn't a luxury resort or a block of condos. It was a massive Tier 4 data center, a sprawling windowless fortress of servers, a future nerve center for cloud computing. Here's the problem, Dex's next message explained, accompanied by topographical maps. A data center of this magnitude is a power-hungry beast. It requires a colossal cooling system, drawing millions of gallons of water from the Savannah River. More importantly, it will generate a massive field of electromagnetic interference, EMI, a bubble of electronic noise. His cursor remotely highlighted a location on the map, my house, my observatory. Your property sits on a small but significant elevation, a natural promontory. It offers an unobstructed line of sight. It's the perfect and only location for the high-powered microwave relays needed to connect Titan Point to the main data spine. He doesn't want to renovate your house, Renee. He needs to demolish it and build a transmitter tower. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The lowball offer, the fraud, the aggressive push to close the deal quietly. He wasn't buying a house, he was clearing a kill zone for his technological empire. While I was processing Dex's bombshell, Marcus Thorne was launching his own low-tech reconnaissance. Armed with a gut feeling that there had to be more, he drove to the Savannah City Archives, a quiet building downtown filled with the city's past. He spent 2 full days poring over brittle, yellowed ledgers and property records. On the 3rd day, he called. The disciplined voice of the marine lawyer was gone, replaced by the breathless excitement of an archaeologist who had just unearthed a tomb. "Renee, are you sitting down?" he asked. "Your great-grandfather." He wasn't just some amateur stargazer. I could hear the rustle of old paper. I found his name in the Port Authority records. For nearly 30 years, from 1910 to the late 1930s, he served as an official volunteer meteorologist for the Port of Savannah. He provided daily, meticulously recorded data on barometric pressure, weather patterns, and the river's tidal fluctuations. His work was essential for safe shipping traffic. I was stunned into silence, a profound sense of awe washing over me. I had always thought of him as a dreamer. I never knew he had been so vital, so deeply woven into the city's practical fabric. "But that's not the payload, Renee." Marcus's voice grew intense. "Here it is, I'm holding it." In 1922, in recognition of his service, the Savannah City Council passed a municipal ordinance. They granted the Orion House property a scientific heritage easement. It's a legal covenant tied to the deed in perpetuity. He took a deep breath before delivering the final decisive blow. The easement explicitly prohibits any new construction within a 500-yard radius of the observatory that could cause, and I am quoting directly, "significant electromagnetic disturbance or obstruction of astronomical line of sight." The world stopped. My reality tilted. My family, in their breathtaking ignorance and petty greed, had sold a priceless piece of civic and scientific history. They had no idea what they'd held. Sterling Blackwood, with all his power and his army of lawyers, had either missed it or he knew and was banking on the fact that no one else would ever find it. He was trying to bury a century-old promise. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "this changes everything." "It changes the entire war," he confirmed, his professional tone returning. This was no longer my house. It was a legally protected scientific monument. It was my great-grandfather's legacy, not of brick and mortar, but of knowledge and selfless service. Blackwood wasn't just committing fraud against me. He was conspiring to erase a piece of American history for profit. The fight had been elevated to a new orbit. My enemy wasn't just a greedy billionaire who had wronged me. He was an enemy of heritage, an enemy of science, and I would not let him win. The morning of the hearing, I sat before my monitor at Schriever. The silent hum of the base a familiar comfort. On my screen was a live orbital tracking display, a web of elegant intersecting lines against the deep black of space. I traced the trajectory of a satellite as it approached its perigee, the point in its orbit where it is closest to Earth, the point of maximum gravitational stress. It felt appropriate. Today was my perigee. When the video link to the courtroom in Savannah activated, I straightened my back. I was in my full service dress uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp, the silver insignia on my shoulders gleaming under the fluorescent lights of my office. It was a suit of armor forged from logic, duty, and truth. On the other side of the country, my family sat at the respondents' table. My mother, Beatrice, was dressed in a severe navy suit, a mask of offended dignity on her face. My father looked small and gray, and Julian looked bored, arrogantly scrolling through his phone as if this were all a tedious interruption. Beside them, exuding an aura of immense wealth and untouchable power, sat Sterling Blackwood. His lawyer, a sleek Atlanta shark named Davison, began. "Your Honor," Davison said, his voice smooth as silk, "the facts are simple. Major Walsh agreed to the sale of this property to my client, as evidenced by this communication." He projected the fake cipher screenshot onto the large monitors in the courtroom. "She is now experiencing a very public case of seller's remorse and is using her sensitive position to avoid scrutiny and extort a patriot like Mr. Blackwood." I watched, my expression unreadable. My pulse was a steady, metronomic beat. When it was Marcus Thorne's turn, he rose slowly. He did not look at the screenshot. He did not look at Davison. He looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm and clear, "we will not waste the court's time debating a fantasy. Instead, we would like to present a forensic analysis of the image file offered as Exhibit A." A new face appeared on a separate monitor. Dex Vance, identified as an expert witness in digital forensics. He was just a silhouette against a neutral background. In a clipped, precise voice, Dex walked the court through the process of his digital autopsy. He showed the magnified glare on the battery icon, the reflection of the window, the angle of the light. Then he displayed the faint, reflected image of the Clipper ship painting. "This image was not taken at an undisclosed location," Dex stated. "It was created in the home office of Mr. Arthur Walsh." He then displayed the second artifact, the ghosted logo of the avian armor phone case. He presented the sales records, the credit card transaction. The device used to create this fraudulent evidence was in a case purchased by and registered to Mr. Julian Walsh. Dex concluded his testimony. "The evidence is a fabrication." A wave of murmuring filled the courtroom. I watched as Julian's face drained of all color, his arrogant smirk melting into a mask of pure panic. He frantically whispered to my mother, who stared ahead, her composure finally cracking. Before Davison could object, Marcus continued, his voice hardening like steel. "And now, Your Honor, for the real reason behind this elaborate deception." One by one, he presented the evidence: the plans for the Titan Point data center, the environmental impact reports detailing the massive water usage and the inevitable electromagnetic interference. And then, with a quiet, deliberate movement, Marcus retrieved a certified, preserved document from his briefcase and placed it gently on the judge's bench. "This, Your Honor, is a copy of the scientific heritage easement, granted to the Orion House property by the city of Savannah in 1922. He let the words hang in the air. This case was never about a family dispute. It has always been a calculated, fraudulent conspiracy by Mr. Sterling Blackwood to illegally destroy a legally protected historical and scientific landmark for his own commercial gain." "This is an outrage," Blackwood shot to his feet, his face a thunderous shade of red, the mask of civility gone. "This is a ridiculous, last-ditch. Mr. Blackwood, sit down." The voice of the judge, Esther Vancy, cut through the room like a scalpel. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with thick glasses and an air of quiet, formidable intelligence. She held the old document in her hands, reading it with an expert's focus. Blackwood, stunned by her command, slowly sat. Judge Vancy looked up, her gaze sweeping over the respondent's table before landing squarely on Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion but absolute authority. "Prior to my appointment to the bench, I was an orbital dynamics engineer at NASA for 15 years. My entire career was built on the integrity of data. I have a professional and deep-seated contempt for corrupted data. Her sharp gaze then moved to my family. "And you," she said, her disappointment palpable even through the video feed. "You sold a piece of your own history, a legacy whose value you couldn't even be bothered to comprehend." Finally, her eyes met mine on the screen. A flicker of understanding, of professional solidarity, passed between us. "Major Walsh," she said, and her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You used logic, evidence, and truth to defend your heritage. The court will do the same." She lifted her gavel. It came down with a sharp, definitive crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. "The contract of sale is declared null and void. The preliminary injunction is made permanent. This court is forwarding the entire record of this proceeding, including all evidence of conspiracy and fabrication of evidence, to the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, and the State Historical Preservation Committee for immediate investigation. This hearing is adjourned." A profound stillness fell. On my screen, I saw my family, frozen in disbelief. I saw Sterling Blackwood, his face a rictus of impotent fury. I saw Marcus Thorne, who simply gave me a slow, single nod. The battle was over, the noise was gone. The signal, clear and true, had been restored. The gavel fell in a courtroom 1,000 miles away, but the sound echoed in the quiet of my office like a sonic boom. Victory. It should have felt triumphant, a surge of elation. Instead, what washed over me was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The adrenaline that had sustained me for weeks drained away, leaving a hollow space in its wake. The battle was over, the war was won, but there were no parades. There was only the quiet hum of my computer and the unsettling silence of what came next. A week later, I took a short leave and flew to Savannah. I pushed open the front door of the Orion House, and the scent of dust, neglect, and stale air met me. The aftermath of the occupation was worse than I had imagined. They had been thorough in their retreat. The good silverware was gone. My mother's jewelry box was empty. The new flat-screen TV they'd insisted on buying was missing from the wall, leaving a stark rectangle of faded paint. They had stripped the house of anything with a price tag. But what they left behind told the real story. In the study, my great-grandfather's books on astrophysics and meteorology sat untouched on the shelves. His leather-bound logbooks, filled with a lifetime of meticulous scientific observation, were still stacked neatly on his desk. In the observatory, the old star charts remained tacked to the wall, their constellations silent witnesses to the petty theft below. They had scavenged the trinkets and abandoned the treasure. They had left the soul of the house behind because they had never been able to see it in the first place. And then the junk signals began. My phone, which had been blissfully silent, began to buzz with a new kind of interference. A barrage of text messages, a final desperate attempt to breach my defenses. From Julian, a string of furious, misspelled accusations. I had ruined him. I was a selfish monster. He hoped I was happy alone in that crumbling old wreck. From my father, a series of weak, meandering laments. He didn't understand why I had to be so hard. Couldn't we all just move on? Family was family, after all. And from my mother, a volley of surgically precise, guilt-inducing prose. After all she had done for me, after all the sacrifices. How could I be so ungrateful, so cruel, as to bring public shame upon them? She signed off with, "Your heartbroken mother." I read them all one by one, but the old sting wasn't there. The anger had cooled, the pain had numbed. I was no longer a participant in the drama. I was a systems analyst observing a malfunctioning network. These weren't messages from family. They were error codes from a corrupted system. Meaningless noise designed to disrupt, to distract, to drag me back into the chaos. They were junk signals. That night, I climbed the narrow stairs to the observatory. The air was cool and still. I didn't open the dome or uncover the telescope. I just sat in the dark, the familiar scent of old wood and metal a comforting presence. I pulled out my phone, the screen casting a pale blue light on my face. I opened the message threads one last time, not with anger, but with a quiet, clinical finality. This data is corrupt, a voice in my head, my own voice, stated with absolute certainty. The files are damaged beyond repair. A system restore is the only logical course of action. I navigated to my contacts list. I found the first name, Beatrice Walsh. My finger hovered over the screen. There was a moment's hesitation, a ghost of a memory of a younger mother, a different time. It vanished. I tapped the name, scrolled down, and pressed the 2 words that would change everything. Delete contact. Then block this caller. Next, Arthur Walsh. I repeated the process. Delete, block. No hesitation this time. Finally, Julian Walsh. Delete, block. It wasn't a feeling of victory. It wasn't triumph or revenge. It was a purge, a cleansing. It was the quiet, profound relief of running a powerful antivirus program and watching it, one by one, identify and eliminate the malicious files that have been slowing down your system, corrupting your operations, and draining your resources for years. The silence that followed was immense. It was a vacuum, both empty and peaceful at the same time. The constant, low-level hum of their static, a noise I hadn't even been fully aware of until it was gone, had vanished. All that was left was a clean, clear, open channel. It's a strange thing, isn't it? That moment when you have to make the choice. The moment you have to press delete on a part of your own life. Not out of anger, but out of a deep, necessary instinct for self-preservation. When you finally realize that holding on to certain corrupted files, certain broken connections, will only damage your own operating system. Perhaps you know that feeling better than most, that quiet, terrifying, and ultimately liberating feeling when you can finally hear your own signal again, clear and true, without the noise. Right? The silence in the aftermath of the storm was the most profound I had ever known. After deleting the corrupted files from my life, I had expected a void, an emptiness. But the quiet that settled in was not empty. It was clean. It was an open channel, waiting for a new transmission. For the first time, I could think about the future not as a defensive strategy, but as a design challenge. My personal orbit had been stabilized. Now it was time for a new trajectory. I didn't retire from the Space Force. My work at Schriever, the silent dialogue with the satellites crisscrossing the heavens, remained the bedrock of my life. But I now had a dual mission. The fight for the Orion House had taught me that a legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you build, and most importantly, something you share. So I began a new project. Using a portion of my own savings and securing grants from scientific foundations like the Planetary Society, I started the slow, careful process of restoration. The house was not to be my residence. It was to be a beacon. Over the next year, craftsmen repaired the sagging porch, refinished the old heart pine floors, and polished the brass on the great telescope until it shone like gold. The house was brought back to life, not as a private dwelling, but as the newly christened Orion Walsh Community Observatory. Its mission, to serve as a free STEM education center for the children of Savannah, with a special focus on encouraging young girls to pursue their passions in science and technology. The day of the grand opening was a perfect, clear Savannah afternoon. The scent of fresh paint mingled with the sweet fragrance of jasmine from the gardens. The observatory, once a dusty, forgotten attic, was filled with a sound I had never heard within its walls: the bright, bubbling laughter of children. Their eyes were wide with wonder as they looked at the displays of nebulae and galaxies I had mounted on the walls. Two familiar figures stood near the back. Marcus Thorne, looking out of place, but profoundly content in a civilian suit, watched the proceedings with a proud smile, and next to him, a man I'd only ever known as a digital ghost, Dex Vance. The enigmatic hacker, looking surprisingly normal in jeans and a t-shirt, was grinning from ear to ear as he patiently showed a small, freckle-faced girl how to adjust the focus on one of the smaller telescopes. He had found a signal here he liked better than the ones he used to hunt. I stood at a small lectern, not as Major Walsh, but simply as Renee. I looked out at the sea of bright, curious faces. My great-grandfather stood in this very spot and looked up at the sky, I began, my voice clear and steady. He saw more than just stars. He saw wonder. He saw the future. He taught me that the greatest legacy a person can leave behind isn't a building or money or a name. It's the gift of curiosity. I gestured to the room around us, to the gleaming telescope, to the children. This place doesn't belong to me. It belongs to him, and now it belongs to all of you. This is his legacy, and it's our shared mission to continue it. So look up, ask questions, and never ever let anyone tell you that your sky is too small. Months later, on a brief return visit to Savannah, my new life found its perfect rhythm. I was sitting in the observatory with a small group of students from a local middle school, the dome open to the velvety, star-dusted night sky. On a large monitor, I had a live, direct feed patched through from Schriever. "Okay, everyone, look up," I said, pointing towards a specific patch of darkness. "Right there, see that bright moving star? That's not a star." On the monitor, the image zoomed in, revealing the familiar shape of solar panels and modules. "That," I said, my voice filled with a quiet pride, "is the International Space Station. It's moving at over 70 miles per hour, and there are astronauts living and working up there right now as we speak." A chorus of soft woos filled the room. A young girl beside me, maybe 10 years old, with eyes that seemed to reflect the entire night sky, turned to me, her face alight with a breathtaking sense of possibility. Can I work there someday?" she asked, her voice a reverent whisper. I looked down at her, and in her hopeful gaze, I saw a reflection of a 12-year-old girl with a blue ribbon, a girl who had once been told her dreams were just dust. I smiled, a real warm smile that reached my eyes. "If you want to," I said softly, "you can go even further than that." I looked past her, up through the open dome at the infinite, welcoming darkness. The legal battles, the betrayals, the anger, they all felt like distant, faded signals from another lifetime. I hadn't just won back a house, I had reclaimed a piece of the sky itself, and now my life's mission was to give it away, to as many people as I could, one star at a time. My story found its new beginning in that observatory, a quiet epilogue written in starlight. But I know that everyone has a story of their own, a time they felt their signal was lost in the noise, a moment when they had to fight to be heard. Your journey of resilience, your quiet battles, and your hard-won peace, they all matter. They are the stories that give the rest of us strength. That's the very reason this channel exists, to share these powerful signals and remind us that we are never truly alone in our fight. If my story resonated with you, I hope you'll subscribe and press the bell so you never miss another story of someone reclaiming their sky.